Backyard Professor Chess videos. I've run across a very interesting theme that I want to chessercise with you guys tonight. And I want to show you a couple of variations of this so that you can at least have it subconsciously, so that when you see an opponent begin to play like this, you know you have something important to do to prevent you falling into this. This is more or less of a trap. And I don't want you to get the idea that we need to play for traps, because we don't. That's not the way to play. However, there are some interesting things that have themes that we want to chessercise about, finding some imbalances and some ideas with the imbalances, yet at the same time not falling into this problem, right? This is a game played by Gibbet and Lazar in Paris, 1924. Way back then, even back then, we have instructional information to share with you. Look at how they're completely fighting right out of the bat on this center. White takes the black pawn. Knight comes to g4. h3. Now, as a general rule, the Steinitz rule, take away the knight's outposts, is very good. Unfortunately, at this point, knight comes to e3 and the game's over. White resigned. Is that not crazy? That is really bizarre, isn't it? So when you see your opponent prancing around with knights, be sure and watch out for this quick little trap, right? I have another one that's similar to this variation I want to show you and expand a little more on. This next sample is by Luzgen and Iofa. It's in Minsk, 1968. Again, the idea is we want to watch what our opponent is doing when they start prancing around with knights. What this does is it shows us, quite frankly, the incredible power of knights. We have a tendency, some of us, and sometimes, and I know I used to basically ignore the knights, not really worry about the knights too much. That you can't do. He brings out his bishop, he's got his knight, he's got a couple of pawn moves here. Now he does bring his knight to d7, so he's going to hit this square and this square here, right? Central squares. This knight, of course, is guarding the f5 and the e5, so he's got this square twice, so they could be square hunting at this point, right? White does something astonishing. Pow. He takes the f7 pawn. And you go, oh, wow, dude. That's pretty bold, isn't it? King takes the f7. And now we're in for a race. Because he's developed his knight, knight comes up to g5, check again. And of course, if king goes to e8, knight goes to e6, and he's got the queen, right? That's a quick little trap, isn't it? If king comes over here to g7, knight still goes to the same spot, check, and he forks the queen, right? If king comes out to here, of course, you've got the queen coming up, and of course, he's going to take the knight because the queen went check, right? Then you simply push the pawn and push the king into check, and it's checkmate. Very quick, very easy, very dirty. That's an interesting theme, isn't it? I've got another variation I want to show you. This next one was played by Alexander Alekin and allies. He was playing a group of people. And this was played in a simultaneous exhibition in 1935. Alekin opens with the e5. Allies come up with c6. Alekin pushes the second center pawn, establishing himself strongly in the center, and they come up to d5, answering him in the center. He brings up his c3 knight. Very good hit here and here. Just building tension in the center. They take the pawn. If I remember right, Alekin takes the pawn. Yes, he does. Be shocking if he didn't, wouldn't it? Now they bring out their f6 knight. So you can see that they're not letting him just simply mow him over in the center, right? They're going to maintain a little bit of pressure. Alekin's going to develop. So as far as development goes, Alekin is ahead of development. We can see he does have one central pawn, which makes his dark squared bishop bad, but it's not useless, right? And he's got a pretty good established center. There's still plenty of room and time for some serious development going on, and then black drops a bombshell. Boom. Queen takes d4. Now that is taking direct center stage against Alekin. How do you think he's going to respond? What would you do? Try to chase the queen away by pushing the pawn, perhaps? You've got your queen, you've got your bishop covered, you've got your knight covered. That would certainly chase the queen away. But the defect with something of that caliber is you don't develop a power. Alekin became one of the fiercest fighting, attacking players because he always outdeveloped his opponents. So he brings a piece to threaten the queen. His development is still ahead of black's. This is a very common theme in Alekin's games. Now the allies just simply drop their queen back, right? That is not what you want to do. Almost any other queen move except just taking it back to the original square. You don't have to drop that far back. My suspicion is he brought his queen up to e2. My suspicion is they were intimidated by Alekin. By now, 1935, he was master of the universe when it came to chess. Nobody played tough against Alekin. If they tried, they got tromped. If they played weak, they got tromped. If they played regular, they got tromped, right? What do you think he's going to do here? It's basically the same variety of theme, only this time it's not quite so obvious. Look at the oddness of this situation with me for a minute. There are no pawns. He has the center completely dominated. There's only one pawn here, and he's got the center covered very well with his knight. Alekin drops that knight right there and goes checkmate. Is that amazing? Pawn can't take it because the queen's covering him. There's nothing that can take that knight. Checkmate. That's a beautiful demonstration, isn't it? I'll be back with yet another illustration. This particular trap with the knight, as it finds its way up to either d6 or e6, is over 100 years old. It's a trap that was well known way back when. It doesn't matter whether you open with the queen or the king pawn. It almost doesn't matter how the opponent responds with meeting the queen pawn or however they play it. I mean, this is a beautiful queen pawn opening, right? And the trap can still occur very easily. The key, I think, to the trap is bringing out one of the knights briefly and quickly, briskly. Now see, even here in this particular game, this is a game by, oh, they don't say, they're just showing the trap. You can see that they're building tension in the center very strongly, and you got to kind of pay attention to the P's and Q's. If you don't, you can get in trouble quick. So he's brought out both of his knights. He's certainly fighting for squares, and black himself is fighting for squares. It's not like black is rolling over. It's not like black is making any kind of a mistake, right? He's really not playing erroneous chess, so far as we can tell. I mean, he takes the pawn. He keeps pressure in the center. The knight takes the pawn. He keeps pressure in the center. He also puts pressure on the pawn chain and up to here. Now he's going to threaten the knight. Now here's the trick. The knight does not go back. The knight goes forward to b5, right? Now, they're following the idea behind Steinitz, which is a legitimate idea. It's a legitimate way to fight knights. This is what you have to watch. He's going to go ahead, pursue his center space. This is one of the imbalances, right? Extra center space. Black certainly has it. He's making white move his knights all over the place. He's taking away places for them to land, right? This is the idea. Now he's going to bring out one of his knights. He brings it out to here. This is just demonstrating this particular trap. White continues his development by putting his queen on a4. So you can see as far as development goes, white is superior with the powers. As far as extra space goes, in the center, black has the extra space, even though it looks like white is starting to hog black space, right? I love how this is played. Well, what's black going to do? He very properly brings out the bishop. He's going to take away this surprise discover check that white wants to do on him, right? Develops a power, takes away, pins the knight to the queen, etc. That's not a bad move. White continues hitting the center. He's not going to let that pawn chain mow him over in the center. Black properly continues developing his pieces, hitting the center knight. The knight's on a halfway decent outpost. The pawns can't get him, see? That's a permanent outpost. Pawns can't chase this knight away, so a knight or a bishop has to exchange that piece. And you have to challenge a knight like that. You cannot leave a central knight on the 5th rank. That is a very strong piece, right? Can you see white's response here? It's absolutely devastating. Matching our theme, he's got the knights out. When someone is bringing out their knights like this, and when they're in tandem, that's a checkmate. Is that not incredible? That is so beautiful. He leaves his queen attacked, and he puts him in checkmate with that knight. That's a fantastically interesting theme, isn't it? The development was okay. It's not that black was dilly-dallying around, really. He had pieces out. He had a great central pawn thrust. It is because of the nature of the coordination of the knights. It's usually a coordination with knights and queens. We need to be aware that this type of thing can happen just that fast to us, right? I've got another example I'll show you. Now, this particular game was played around 1900. It's by Levenberg and Bjorklund. It's a very, very fun game. When we Chessercise this, and you know what I mean by Chessercise is I'm not looking to do a lot of 8 and 9 move deep variations. What I want to do is explore how to lay the foundation to read the chessboard no matter what position we find ourselves in. It acts as a roadmap. Understanding the imbalances and how they work acts like a roadmap for us so that it teaches us what, how, and why to do certain types of moves. He exchanges the pawn, and of course the queen's not going to let that one go. So here we have a queen in the center of the board, superior development by black, right? Well, white's got a response to that, right? Hitting the queen by developing a power, gaining tempo. Now, in the Alekin game, we saw how his opponent put the queen back. This time, the queen comes over to a5, and I honestly think that's the better way to do this. If you're going to bring your queen out this early, as a rule, it really is best not to do that. White continues correctly developing. This is an imbalance, but it's a temporary imbalance. Black can catch up with white, or if it was reversed, white could catch up with black. So when you get ahead in development, you have to really pursue the position or the game actively, dynamically, because your opponent can and probably will catch you. He's going to strengthen his center. He's going to give support to his bishop. Watch what black does. Bishop g4. Notice, just a moment ago, the imbalance of superior development was in white's favor. Now it is in black's. And black has a crisscross coming through, directly threatening the queen. Isn't this interesting? But it is an imbalance you want to pay attention to. Also notice the other imbalance, and I don't know if this is an imbalance, but it's basically the board position. There's not a lot of central pawns in this game yet, is there? There's one, and it's on a lowdown. So the bishops are taking active roles. In an open board, we know it's bishop's board. There's no guesswork to that. Never. Well, he's going to cut the bishop off. Rather than moving the bishop back out of the way, he maintains this pin on this pawn to the queen. He stays developed. Yeah, he's on the side of the board, but he stays developed. White continues stepping up the development, possibly indicating he wants to do a surprise check on the queen. Do you see that? Black continues trying to strengthen the center, give his knight an outpost in the center to contest the center. This is pretty good chess at this point, right? The queen develops. You can see they're both very actively trying to get as much developed in a rational way as they can. The knight comes out. Once again, the development is pretty close to even here. This is really nice to see. And now white hits him. White sees something. He's going to put his knight there, and you say that is as stupid as the day is long. Give him the knight? No, it's a trap. He has exposed the queen to his bishop. So his knight is perfectly safe at this move. And the queen goes all the way back in now. And now what do you suppose white's going to do? In relation to our theme that I've been emphasizing in this particular Chessercise with the different variations, the knight comes right to there and goes checkmate. One of the keys to this type of a trap is putting the queen in front of the king. Now, as a general rule, that's probably not a good idea, especially if rooks have access to getting the open file, because then they trap your king, they pin your queen to your king, right? You lose your queen. In this instance, there's not that possibility, so he was perfectly fine. But part of the coordination of this trap involves the queen with the knight. And it's quite a beauty, isn't it? One last variation to show you. This is a game by Paul Kears and a man named Arlamovsky. This was played in 1950. For those of you who are not familiar with chess history as such, Kears just barely missed going to the world crown. He was an exceptionally excellent chess player. So this is quite a game with his opponent. He opens up with the Slav defense of the Sicilian. I believe that's what that is. Kears, oh nope, I lied. Sorry, he did not do that. I'm looking at the wrong one. He brought out the knight, hitting the pawn, although it is guarded, right? Yeah, this is how it went down. Black exchanged the pawn, and of course, usually when they do that, the knight will retake the pawn. So, after just a few of the opening moves, white has the center, and he has the superior development, right? Easy enough. But again, that imbalance can be, and usually is, temporary, because now black has caught up. Now black hasn't equalized, of course not, because now white can bring yet the queen in front of the king. Are you noticing the familiar pattern here? The knight is out. The knight has moved to either the 4th or the 5th rank, and now the queen comes out to help with the knight, being very, very, very coordinated. Now he does an excellent knight development, which attacks the knight. Correct? Wrong. Knight simply goes to here, and it's checkmate. This happens, see, you can't take it because of the queen. This is a grandmaster game. Several of the games that I've showed you tonight, the variations, are masters and grandmasters games. This happens to the greatest of players. Now this is fascinating to understand. It doesn't take a grandmaster to deliver this kind of shock to an amateur. Well, in amateur games this happens also, but even this happens in grandmaster games, so therefore that's why I wanted to show you several of these variations, kind of give you a rundown on several different kinds of games that have had the same theme. When you see your opponent start prancing his knights around and he's pulled his queen out or he's pulled a bishop out, you want to pay very close attention. Rather than the knight move, do you see what Kear's opponent could have done and should have done? Right? Yeah. Bring the queen out. That would have prevented him from doing that knight move, wouldn't it? He's certainly not going to do it here. He's simply going to lose his knight. So if you're noticing that your opponent puts his queen in front of him and he's got his knight coming up here, you've got to watch the d6 and f6 squares very carefully. Even if you think you have him covered with a pawn. Because when he went to there, yeah, he has it covered with the pawn, but oops, the pawn is pinned. So that's kind of a rundown on a very interesting variety, on a very interesting, subtle little trap. This also demonstrates to us the ability of the knights. It doesn't take forever to get across that board, does it? Just a couple of quick hops, and that's the game. That's why this can take you by surprise. So, anyway, thanks for watching my videos. Happy chessercising and checkmating. And I will see you guys and gals in the next video.